For more on this, we're pleased to welcome back sociologist Nacira Ganif, who teaches at the University of Paris at Saint-Denis. Thank you for being with us. Also with us, France 24's Douglas Herbert. Doug, just remind us, when it comes to hate speech, France already cracks down.
Yeah, they're not reinventing the wheel here. The hate speech restrictions, if you want to call it that, restrictions on just free speech in general, have been incrementally going on to the books or in more informal sort of measures. Going all the way back, you go to the 19th century. I mean, we talk about France being the Declaration of the Rights of Man, is sort of the home of free speech. Yet, since you had the 1881, go all the way back, right, into the 19th century, the freedom of press law there were some exceptions written into it right away, notably exceptions against incitement to things like discrimination, hatred, physical violence, harm to someone, defamation, insults. And since then, we've steadily seen more restrictions being added, more exceptions to the universal free speech rule, if you will. Notably, 1939, you had a lot of anti-Semitism in the popular press, the tabloid press here in France. So there were some restrictions on anti-Semitic speech. During the 1970s, some more protections for speech aimed against the Muslim population. There's 6 million Muslims in France. Obviously, there were fewer back then. You've had, obviously, more in 1980. Parliament made it a crime, denial of the Holocaust, essentially, or denying crimes against humanity such as those perpetrated by the Nazis during the Holocaust. So if you want to look at this in the broader sort of French historical context, this is the latest in what we have seen as an incremental stepping up or amendments or exceptions, shall I say, to free speech, universal free speech law enshrined in the French Revolution, so to speak.
All right, and they're making some of this speech, which was that law that you mentioned, a law on the on freedom of press. Now it's going to be of the domain of the penal code. This speech. What do you think of the bill? Is it? Are they going about it the right way, the government?
I just wonder what it is supposed to target, actually, and I think it betrays some sort of a lack of confidence in the population, in the French population, in its ability to live together, to cross over to the other communities or so-called communities. And I'm not sure that we are addressing properly the whole issue of living together, multiculturalism as it is now part of the French fabric.
That phrase "living together" has become a catchphrase since the Paris terror attacks.
Yes, and interestingly, what comes out is that it's all about freedom of speech, and everybody was on the street on January 11th in the favor of freedom of speech, and yet it seems that we are not able, as a population, to undertake the task of freely speaking and freely exchanging not only convictions but also thoughts and political debates.
And there is that basic tension there, and this is what is really drawing the charge, at least from the critics, to what the French government is doing now, who call this double standards, who call it hypocrisy, and they're putting out there the question. They say, well, okay, you pass more and more of these restrictive measures. Where do you end up drawing that demarcation line, that boundary between, okay, the fear of acts that condone terror, because that ultimately is what people are scared of, that you'll spread a lot of terrorist ideology by letting people run rampant with whatever they want to say, and the right to say what you want in a society that proclaims to be a free society.
We saw in the days that followed the Paris terror attacks this controversial satirist by the name of Dieudonné, who made a dubious remark saying, "I'm Charlie Koulibaly." Je suis Charlie was, of course, the slogan from the thing. And Ahmed Koulibaly, one of the attackers.
He was basically conflating Charlie Hebdo.
And he's been fined for that.
And he was fined for that. It's called, there's a crime on the books, apology for terrorism. And it wasn't just him. He was one of the more prominent names, obviously, that's come under scrutiny and attack. But you had dozens of people rounded up really in the week or two right after the Charlie Hebdo attacks for this so-called crime of apology of terror. You had one case of a man saying to some police officers something like, I wish there were...
A school student was
a student as well.
In Nice, I think, yeah.
Yes.
And some guy saying, I wish there were more Kouachis. Kouachi, obviously, those brothers were the ones who attacked Charlie Hebdo, saying to the officers, I hope you'll be next. He was detained. That's an apology.
If I may add something to that.
But it seems as though public opinion is with the authorities on this one. Foreigners seem more shocked about this than French people. French people seem okay with it.
They seem to understand that the level of racism is really high in France. So if there's any good news about that would be the one. But on the other hand, you would be also surprised by the fact that nobody is really protesting about the laws that have been voted earlier this week that has to do with surveillance and intelligence that would allow, all kind of controls and invasive surveillance into phone calls, into where you go online. And at the same time,
there was a poll even that said that 2 out of 3
Yes.
French people support those stepped up surveillance.
As if they felt that they were not able to address these questions on their own and articulate and mature about what it means to be in a democracy and to express oneself and to express whatever you
Now,
feel.
you teach in a northern working class suburb of Paris, one of these banlieues that people
Right.
talk about. How do people feel about all the new measures by the government?
I think most of the time, and what I see, you have a lot of signs outside the university, and I see them every time I go inside the building. It's all about being too harsh on democracy, and they have the feeling that there's, freedom of speech and freedom of expression is being assaulted by the French government. And youngsters, all these young people that are students in my university have the feeling that they are not trusted as real citizens that are able to make the difference between terrorism apology and critical thinking. And this is what it's all about. It's about promoting critical thinking and the ability to stand in the public space and express oneself.
And another argument of the groups that have come out against these measures, including the very prominent SOS Racisme here in France, the League of Human Rights has come out against it. They believe it's going to perhaps favor some sort of summary justice, these very quick trials, putting people. Right now, at least, you have to have a more deliberative, debated process because it has been often under the freedom of press law. They think that this is going to lead to much more quick, expeditive summary sentences, and you're going to remove that element of reasoned debate.
But once again, this is a minority. We saw recent local elections. The far right did very well.
Populism works. Absolutely. We're in a climate right now in France of a lot of populism. A politician isn't going to go wrong in many cases, isn't going to alienate a lot of the French population. I said there's 6 million Muslims in France, many of whom are very much against these laws. But the rest of the population, the calculation among a lot of the politicians in France is they're not going to go radically wrong by defending this type of measure.
Yeah.
I want to ask about another aspect of the bill, which is the education aspect. It gets back to that concept of living together.
Yeah.
What do you think of the measures that are being put forth this Friday by the government?
I think that promoting laïcité or secularism as something that would enhance the ability to live together is something that is already there. This is not the answer. It's just something that works as a decoy and some sort of in order to make sure that the French were very keen and very attached to this notion of laïcité would feel secured. But actually, I'm not sure that education is about that. It's about giving all kind of schools in different parts of France the same means in order to teach to all the pupils and all the students equally. And equality has become a major point and a major issue in the French schooling system.
And in fairness, there was a lot of debate about this just after exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But that was 3 months ago. How's it going now? Is the debate still there?
Yeah, the debate is still raised by especially people who teach at the university, who teach for future teachers. But also, I think that there is this kind of trope that has to do with security, with control, that is totally overwhelming any kind of other debate that has to do with equality and finally giving the same opportunities to all the students in the public schooling system. I think this is really something that has become less relevant, unfortunately.
So I guess a lot of people are asking this question in France because you remember, after the Paris terror attacks, there was that big demonstration on the 11th of January. And people are asking the question, what's become of the spirit of the 11th of January?
Yeah, well, it seems that it has been totally focused on surveillance, control, and the narrowing of the public space and the ability to freely speech and to express oneself. I think this is something that will be damaging.
But is there a backlash against, we saw in the report, an increase in Islamophobic acts, increase in anti-Semitic acts among your students? Is there a reflection on that? Is there a backlash against intolerance?
No, I think they act very maturely, and they are very responsible and articulate about the way they speak about that. I mean, it's
More so than before?
yeah, probably so. And I think this says something about the way young generations from colonial and migrant background are growing as real citizens, actually. And this is something that there is some sort of distrust of their ability to be so.
All right. So put more faith in young people.
And especially go and talk with them, and they would realize that you don't need to be as under control.